Hello and welcome. I am Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. This is Witch on Witch, and in this episode, I have several lovely guests who were kind enough to come on with me. We will begin with our member Nocturnal Pagan. How are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty well.
Excellent.
Um,
You want to tell the people who you are, what you practice, and a little bit about your own pet projects?
so I'm a nocturnal pagan, but people can call me Sean. It doesn't bother me too much. I am a practicing shaman, currently focusing on Nordic and Wiccan faiths and trying to see what I can learn from them to expand my own path.
Wonderful. Next up, the next guest is no stranger to Witch on Witch, Wiccan conservative, also known as Georgia Liberty in our circles. How are you, ma'am? And just in case we have any new viewers, will you remind them who you are and what you do?
Hello, hello, Miss Brigantia. I am so excited to be here with everybody tonight. My name is Georgia Liberty. I run the Wiccan Conservative YouTube channel on YouTube, and the page is also syndicated on Rumble. For those who do not partake in the YouTube, you can find me on Rumble. And I am also known as Georgia Liberty on Facebook and on Twitter as well. So you can find me there. And I am your local conservative Wiccan, not wicked, witch.
Next up, we have our member star, Crotoris. How are you, lady?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I guess you would call me maybe more of an eclectic witch. I don't really have a specific path that I'm particularly following. I'm fascinated by all. I mostly am here to just learn and absorb and share experiences that I have had. I haven't been practicing as long as some of these other members here. I would say maybe a couple of years. But I've always been drawn to the ether and what happens after death, reincarnation, various subjects like that. I don't have any channels to support or to promote, but you can only find me here. So, uh,
Yet another reason to join the Discord server. And last but not at all least, we have the Druid Fox. Madam, will you please tell everyone who you are and what you do?
I'm Druid Fox. I've been practicing and studying Druidry and various denominations of Druidry for well over a decade at this point. I tend to take a more philosophical approach to it than a strictly religious approach. But I love learning about other paths and practices. I have a blog, The Druid's Den, on WordPress, where I post pagan-related book reviews and answer questions about Druidry. And I also occasionally write books.
Tell everyone about your most
And I
recent
am
book
just
real
here to,
briefly.
my most recent book. I wrote a book called Foxes Galore. It's available on Amazon. It's about a little girl who's a witch and she loves foxes, so she decides to make a magical potion to create more fox friends. But it gets a little out of hand because it doesn't turn off. And you can read that. It's called Foxes Galore. It's available on Amazon and it has some lovely illustrations that my cousin did for me. So if you're
Fantastic.
interested, you can check it out.
All right. Now that our audience has some sense of who we are, let me explain to them what we're going to be doing tonight. Every Wednesday evening, about 6:30, 7 o'clock, a lot of us drift into the Lounge Voice channel on our Discord server, and we have conversations. Sometimes it's just visiting, sometimes it's what if off the wall tangent situations, and sometimes we get into really deep spiritual subjects. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if people could get a little bit of a taste of what it's like to attend to one of these conversations, the different directions it can go into, and hopefully maybe persuade a couple of people to join in with us next time. So, I thought we could begin with a couple of topics, and the first one I want to begin with is uncommon animal spirits. All of us have been doing our studies long enough to realize that every living thing, plant, animal, or human, has spiritual qualities and properties, a certain magical soul, if you will. Everything is good for something. But not all of the members of the animal kingdom are as prominent as others when it comes to being referred to as animal spirit guides or looking to them for lessons and seeing what we can take from them. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun to highlight a couple of ones that don't really get the spiritual spotlight all that often? And I shall jump in and begin us with the dreaded mosquito. Because if there's one creature on this planet that no one seems to be able to figure out what on earth it's good for and why Mother Nature did not dispense with it long ago, it's got to be the mosquito. So I did not find a lick of spiritual information on this, as I suspected, but I did look a little bit at the scientific. And from what I got, as far as they
Hmm.
can tell, it has two primary purposes: to serve as a food sources for birds and aquatic creatures, the flies for the birds, obviously, and the larvae that the mosquitoes plant in water that feeds a lot of the fish, apparently. But they also act as pollinators, which I was not previously aware of. So
Hmm.
beyond that,
I was not aware.
yeah, neither was I. It was definitely news to me. And science seems to be unsure what, if any, other purpose they serve, but they said, maybe we don't want to eliminate them because they could be doing something we just haven't figured out yet, which that's always the case with some of our pesky things. But spiritually, I got to thinking about this because we could see them as essentially as a nature's delivery system, or at least part of that, with their pollinating work, of being able to take necessary components from place to place in order to ensure that the process of life continues to go underway. They are persistent, as any of us who have tried to evade mosquitoes from biting us is well aware. There's a lot of lessons in persistence, and while we don't necessarily like to be on the receiving end of the mosquito's persistent, there are times in life when maybe we need to become the mosquito in order to get something accomplished and in order to get people who would otherwise not cooperate with us at all to actually do something productive. And I also thought that perhaps
Interesting.
in addition to their kind of survival instincts, maybe it's also their independence. Because I look at them and I see a creature that is self contained. It does not care what anything else thinks of it. It has its mission, it's going to be doing what it does. And I thought maybe in this age of hyper self consciousness, we could take something away from that. Learn that maybe other people's opinions aren't the end all be all. So, thoughts on that, gang? Because I found a spiritual purpose for mosquitoes, and I am proud of that. I'm going to own that.
I was also just going to say I'm proud of you.
Definitely a perspective that I don't think a lot of people would have because they are on the receiving end of the mosquito's persistence. But a unique take indeed to say be like the mosquito, and even though your persistence is annoying, know that you have a purpose. So that's definitely a key takeaway there.
Okay, I think we've done it for the
Yeah,
mosquito. Does anyone else have any other animal that they think is kind of unusual and out there that doesn't get, all that much attention?
I
Um,
think
oh, go ahead, Drew.
I think a segue from mosquito, but similar, is also the wasp, because that's also another creature that most people find very annoying and can't think of a use of, because they tend to be very angry and, but again, from the scientific point of view, they also occasionally pollinate things. Um, but I thought, in a similar vein of persistence, I thought the wasp could possibly teach people how to stand up for their tribe and their territory, even against creatures that on the surface look like they would be much bigger and stronger than you. But if you just, you know, stand up for yourself, you stand a very good chance of driving them away.
I love that
Hmm.
lesson. I think that is so relevant to the times we're living in. I can think of endless applications. Let's see, Sean, I think you were about to say something. Where were your thoughts taking you?
So the animal that I looked into a bit, being actually my spirit animal, being a salamander.
Ooh,
Oh, that's interesting.
tell.
Um, so in my personal experience with salamanders, it's kind of it's more of, instead of being persistent and keep pushing, it's knowing when's the right time to avoid trouble. And when something's not worth the energy, they're kind of skittish creatures that avoid much conflict. But I think there's something to be learned in that as well, that sometimes persistence, while it is something we all need, isn't the correct option. Sometimes something isn't worth the time or energy. It's going nowhere, and you're chasing something that isn't gonna do anything for you. So, with my personal experience, they're trying to teach me how to let go of these things. I'm like, I have to have this. I need it in my life, and I really don't.
I like that. It seems like a fantastic opportunity to learn about balance because, I mean, there's no mode of being that's going to be the right mode of being 100% of the time in life. So I love that you bring up the salamanders' qualities of saying, okay, so let's think about this. What are you actually getting out of it? Oh, nothing? Can we move on to other projects? I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah,
Both of these topics that have been brought up of persistence and and also what Druid said of standing up for yourself and then knowing when enough is enough. Those are all qualities that are less and less found in society today, which is rather unfortunate. So maybe we should all channel more of these unpleasant or unlikely spirit animals.
Very true.
True.
Now, I think before we started
Well, just the
taping,
fact,
oh, go on, Georgia.
I was just going to say, just the fact that you can recognize some positive qualities in an animal that is looked upon so, harshly, and kind of see their purpose is the main idea of this whole exercise, and knowing that everything has its place.
Speaking of which, that is the perfect segue because I believe before we started recording, Druid, you said something about tapeworms. I am agog with
Yes,
curiosity.
my husband said he couldn't think of a single positive quality about tapeworms, and they must be the spirit animal of politicians because nobody wants them around, and they're very difficult to get rid of, and they just cause problems. And I said,
And
well,
all they do is suck.
but isn't there something to be said for being able to survive in a hostile and acidic environment?
Mm.
And isn't there something to be said for, you know, being able to live with people even when they don't want you there?
Oh,
And I don't know, so I think maybe you could learn something from them. I
I,
know in some cases, I think they used to be used in medieval medicine for certain things. I can't remember off the top of my head what exactly at the moment, but so I guess there are some things that they could be good for.
that is fascinating because I've never thought of them in that light of just looking at their just sheer adaptability and their ability to survive. That is actually really profound because I can't think of any segment of our society that actually feels comfortable right now. Whether someone's troubles are real or imagined, I think a lot of people just, perhaps even the vast majority of us, just kind of feel off balance, not really belonging or feeling welcomed anywhere, not being able to relax or let the guard down. I mean, wow. I mean, you found a way to make
And I,
tapeworms a good thing. I'm very
well, and
impressed.
I couldn't remember off the top of my head, but I've just done a quick Google. And so apparently they used to prescribe tapeworms for certain things, and it appears that it has some enzymes that it releases that appear to protect against memory loss.
Fascinating.
Now that's interesting.
So,
Huh. I wonder if that might open an avenue in the medical field for helping people with, I don't know, amnesia and dementia, Alzheimer's, and the like. That's very interesting. And what an unlikely spot to find anything that's actually helpful.
right?
I
And even
definitely know that some like dementia and Alzheimer's that can be onset from like heavy metals that are within the body. And maybe the tapeworm dispels of that because
Oh,
it's,
yeah,
I mean, that definitely feels like it could have a direct correlation, if not other added benefits that you're discussing that I'm not even contemplating, you know?
right. And
yeah.
so, yeah, they may be kind of icky and weird and nobody really likes them, but maybe they evolved with some other purpose in mind other than just, to be there and be icky.
Yeah,
That
for
that's
sure.
perfect example of like the leech and cleaning the blood.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and they used
100%.
to use they use leeches even today if
Mm-hmm.
you're having trouble with blood clotting and things. Even
Mm-hmm.
today, there are some um, places where you can go and they will prescribe leeches to help with certain blood conditions
I was just thinking of
because
perhaps
they
the
haven't quite
spiritual. Oh, go on.
yeah because they haven't quite figured out a way to synthesize some of those enzymes yet, and so they said, well, you have to use the real thing.
Right.
Well, and I was thinking about possibly the spiritual application. I mean, imagine, we sit down, we're meditating, and we're reaching out to the leech spirit, of getting perhaps a really unusual lesson about purification. I, I don't know. This isn't a well thought out thought because it just popped into my head while you guys were talking. But I think that'd be interesting to explore because when would us, in the usual course of events, any of us even think about, reaching out to that animal spirit at all, let alone for the process of purification? You're like, oh, Imulk has come around. It's time to purify. Hello, Lychee. It's just not something that generally happens in the course of things. So, well, I hope this is, getting people
Right.
listening to us, maybe their minds are opening and they're thinking about, there could be more possibilities on working with animal spirits than perhaps what they thought before. So, before we move on, does anyone else have any kind of off the wall animal that they'd love to highlight?
I don't know what sort of spiritual application, but I just adore bats. And my sister, I was helping her move, and she hates bats. And she had 3 bats on 3 Saturdays in a row, pretty much literally driving her out of her old house. But for me, I thought it was an interesting thing to be there to witness her viewing a bat in her house as just this terrible, terrible, awful thing. And I probably wouldn't view it as such a terrible thing. So, but I think that bats maybe are more accepted. I feel like society is starting to lean more towards what is the shadow side, what are the dark things that we've treated as forbidden before that now we're sort of opening the gate to. So I like that we're already thinking about stretching that thought process even farther into these even more undesirable animals.
I remember a couple of years ago, I
Right.
saw these pictures of little baby bats all swaddled with either pacifiers or little teeny tiny bottles in their mouths, and they just looked like
Mm.
sky puppies. And I fell in
Yep.
love. So I'm right
Mm-hmm.
there with you with the bats. Okay.
Yep. I think maybe it's because bats are mammals and people are like, more
Hmm.
accepting of mammalian creatures than we are of something that's slimy or scaly or,
For
Well,
a
sure.
little bit further away from us on the
yeah, a little bit closer tribe, scientifically speaking. Okay, cool. So, as we mentioned, and when we were introducing ourselves, you mentioned how you were all on different paths, and I think that's an important thing to highlight for our audience. I don't think we really have two of a kind anywhere, because even people who broadly share the same path, with witchcraft or druidry or Norse religion or what have you, everyone has their own different takes on it. But along with different takes on spirituality, everyone seems to have their own version of important celebrations. So let's talk about what we celebrate, why you do it, and if maybe very briefly about maybe how you celebrate perhaps your favorite observance or your observance that's the most important to you personally. And it's an open floor, whoever wants to go first.
I nominate Druid first. Druid, because
All right.
she's probably got the best celebrations.
Well,
Regale us.
I'll tell you what I celebrate, and then you can decide if they're worth it or not. So my family typically gets together 4 times a year, for the basic holidays that most Americans would probably recognize. We have Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, and the 4th of July. And those are basically the 4 seasonal holidays that my family celebrates. And of course, most of my family is very much Christian. And, again, with my particular path, I have no problem celebrating those holidays with them as family gathering occasions because I think it's important to celebrate your family and coming together and to maintain family tradition.
Hmm.
And so, but as far as other holidays I celebrate, on my own, I personally really like to celebrate Halloween or Samhain. I love trick or treating and dressing up and celebrating, the changing of the leaves in the fall. I
Hmm.
also celebrate New Year's Eve, and then I celebrate St. Patrick's Day, not because I really care a great deal about a Catholic saint, but because I have a lot of Celtic heritage in my ancestry, and so I like to acknowledge that ancestry and celebrate, my heritage.
Hmm.
And then I also celebrate St. Valentine's Day, again, not because I care a great deal about a Catholic saint, but because, it's a holiday about love and affection and being there for um, the people whom you love. And it also happens to be right within a day or two of my birthday as well. So typically I do it's my birthday, but it's also Valentine's Day. So I get a heart shaped cake and it's, very,
Oh, that's handy.
sweet and loving and
That's awesome.
cute. Um, but then as far as specifically Druid holidays that I celebrate because I'm a Druid that I wouldn't celebrate if I wasn't a Druid, I like to celebrate um, the signs of the seasons. So a lot of Druids I know will celebrate the Wicca Wheel of the year. They'll celebrate the solstices and the equinoxes, and they'll celebrate the Celtic, harvest days. But what I like to do is I like to celebrate the physical signs of the season. So the first time the flowers bloom in the spring, when I notice that, I might say, this would be a good time to celebrate the blooming of the flowers. Or, in the summertime, the first ripening of the strawberries. This would be a good time to celebrate, the first fruits. Or in the fall, when the leaves first change color, it might be a good time to celebrate the harvest and the apples are ripening, and it might be a good time to celebrate that. And, in the winter, I feel like it's always good to acknowledge when the days start changing from longer nights to shorter nights, and it might be a good time to celebrate, the changing of the sun
Hmm.
in the winter. And so I don't follow a particular dedicated, this is the calendar day and this is when you must do it, and there must be exactly so many weeks between each holiday. I look for the actual physical sign of the season. And for me, the reason I do that is because I feel like, you know, a lot of our pre industrial ancestors and things, they had ways of keeping track of time, but they weren't really as rigid about it as I think we tend to become today.
Hmm.
And I think it's more important to celebrate the season when it is that season rather than to celebrate on a particular day at a particular time.
Too mechanical.
Yeah, there is something
Yeah,
to be
and so
said
I
about
feel
that.
like I think it brings me in closer touch with the natural cycle of things as well. Um, if I'm doing it, when it's that time in the cycle, and it's not going to be on the same day every year because, the seasons aren't going to, they don't flow according to our calendar. They flow according to, a larger cycle.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I absolutely agree with you. There's a lot of mainstream holidays that we celebrate for the simple fact that it goes along with the quote unquote calendar. It's kind of hard to avoid federal holidays because everybody is pretty much partaking in that particular day. So, that's it's kind of like a bonus for the kids. Other than that, I'm with you. My favorite of all time is, Halloween. That's the start of the new year, and I like to dress up and go all out, decorating and things like that. But there is something to be said for just celebrating where we are in the gravitational pull of the universe and being in tune with that. And I just love, 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 love that you put it that
Yep.
way.
Well, and I do have one holiday that I made up
Oh,
completely,
yes.
just made it up just for funsies, and I'll share if you like.
Oh, please do,
Sure.
because I think
Um,
it's the most
so,
adorable thing in the world. I remember you telling me about it.
so I invented a holiday, as you know. My druid name is Fox, and so I love foxes. And so I came up with a holiday to celebrate the fox, and it's called Vulpinalia. It's a holiday for clever foxes, and on this day, it takes a couple of days. On the first day, you buy a present for somebody and you hide it somewhere around your house, but you don't like really hide it. You just put it somewhere in plain sight, but maybe a little out of the way. You might put it under your coffee table or on top of your refrigerator, or just stick it on the bookshelf between a couple of books. You're not really trying to make it difficult to find, but it's part of the game you play. And the other person is supposed to, they have 2 days to find the present, right? And so if you find the present, then you get a prize. And the prize is any food that's colored orange. So a Reese's Pieces, a piece of fruit, a slice of cheese. So you get a prize for finding your present, and you get a prize for hiding the gift if they can't find it. But either way, the person still gets the present in the end because this isn't, it's supposed to be for fun and not actually make you stress out over it.
I
Um,
I think that's so
and so
adorable.
it's just a lovely holiday, and so I celebrate it in January between the 12th and the 15th. But you could celebrate it anytime you like. It's just a made-up holiday. And I wrote a little poem uh, for Vulpinalia, and it goes: Once there was a little fox whose Latin name was Vulpine. Little fox loved presents and asked for them all the time. Little fox loved orange and would eat up orange food, like cake and cookies or some cheese, they tasted just so good. Little fox loved hiding things, he thought it was so clever, and when somebody found them, he laughed and laughed with pleasure. Little fox liked giving gifts far better than receiving, and Vulpinalia little foxes are rewarded for perceiving. If you can find your present first, you get an extra treat. And also if you hide it good, which is pretty neat. And so you decorate for Vulpinalia by, putting out orange things, or you can um, make little orange foxes out of orange construction paper, or, little things like that. And it's just supposed to be a fun, cute holiday that I made up just because I thought it was fun. But whatever you do, don't Google the old ancient Rome Vulpinalia. I did that, and I did not like what I found out. Apparently, way back in ancient Roman times, which I didn't know before I picked the name, they used to celebrate a similar holiday. And they would celebrate by capturing a wild fox tying sticks to it and lighting it on fire and then letting it run through a
Oh,
field.
oh, that's
And I
Yeah.
was
terrible.
like, oh, that's awful. I'm like, you know what? I know I picked this name without knowing that it was a real historical thing, but I'm like, I'm going to reclaim this, okay? Foxes
Yes,
are good and clever, and they need a holiday that doesn't involve setting their asses on fire.
Oh,
100%.
absolutely. My goodness. I tell you what, those Romans, they were a rough bunch.
So
Oh,
now, if you'd like to celebrate
Yes.
Vulpinalia, please do not light anything on fire.
safety and humanitarian tip there. Alrighty, Star Sean, are there any particular celebrations that are extra special to you, or what do you like to celebrate within your pagan practice?
Star, do you want to go first, or do you want
I
me?
I don't care.
Okay, I'll go real quick then. For the, I also celebrate like the common practices like most people do with like Christmas and everything like that with my family. But for my faith, I really enjoy celebrating Yule. This last year, I went out and got a Yule log and did it up, did decorations, everything like that. Um, I haven't really had the opportunity to, because I haven't had my own space, and whatever I do, I like to leave it there for about a week uninterrupted as like a full thank you to the gods and a full celebration. Um, but currently don't have the space to do that. But the only other thing I do is I celebrate every full moon by going outside during my practice and either giving a thanks to whichever god in question I am interacting with on that night, or if it's on the rare occasion I am doing something for personal needs, I will add a bigger thank you at the end of it.
That's
But
really
other
beautiful.
than that, I don't do much with holidays, unfortunately.
Ah, there's plenty of
Well, that
time
seems
yet.
like a lot.
You keep yourself busy. What about you, Star? What do you like to do?
I was going to say my answer is probably very similar to Nocturnal Pagan. Uh, I still feel very babyish in the way of my practice. Um, so there's also, for context, I'm a Virgo, so I put a lot of pressure on myself. And so I have these grandiose ideas of things that I see as possible for celebrations, and then I don't end up making it come together. So I've been trying this last year to just really sort of focus on doing things like what Sean said, of trying to observe the full moons when I
Hmm.
can remember. If I miss one, it's okay. It's not that big of a deal. um, I absolutely despise celebrating the Christian holidays. I participate in my parents' Christian things a little bit. I refuse to do other things that they made me do when I was younger. But I do enjoy Yule and sort of retaking Yule back from. There's a lot of unlearning when you've been raised in a Christian practice, where you have to let go of these preconceived notions that you had. And I know that Brigantia was there for me when Yule was happening, and I was expressing some of my concerns here in the lounge about, well, I don't want to do anything because this is not the gods that I want to serve. And Brigantia helped me see that, hey, um, Christmas was not the original holiday. Um, Briganti does a lot to bring me back to center. So I just try to simplify and do the simple things in the day in and the day out. And I was really glad that Sean pointed out leaving out offerings for a significant amount of time rather than just like one day. I do feel like that's very common amongst most pagan practices that I have experienced, versus maybe people who are on other religious paths that don't observe that. So.
Cool, cool.
Nice.
Well, I guess I'm going last. I do celebrate the Wheel of the Year, so that's Yule and Amal, Ostara, Beltane, Letha, Lunasa, Mabon, and then Samhain. I might be calling them slightly different words going forward because most of those names have Celtic connotations, and I am moving very definitely into the Norse pantheon. But there were still significant days within the Germanic calendars that correspond or relate to what's commonly celebrated as the Wheel of the Year. And of course, I do love my moons. But this year, I'm adding something to my routine. It's called Lokabrenna. And yes, this
Hmm.
is because of Loki. He is associated with a star that we now commonly call Sirius, but in times past it was referred to as Loki's torch. And it has a special rising, a special time of year during very, very late summer. It's at its peak August 10th of this year. The date varies from year to year because, of course, it does. It's Loki. Things can't be the same 2 days running. But I want to spend that time not just honoring him and thanking him for coming into my life in the big way that he has and for all the guidance and direction he's given me, which has really been paying off in spades. But I also want to signal my willingness to take up the torch, whatever it is that he is wanting me to carry forward and pursue and go after very zealously. I want to do something with an offering and maybe with ritual that signifies my willingness to do that. I'm not being dragged along by my hair. I'm not doing anything reluctantly. We have developed a very good working relationship. I am wanting to get to know the rest of the Pantheon much better than I do now. And I want to take up this work. And I also want to express my gratitude because he's a deity. In the final analysis, neither he nor any of the other gods have any obligation to do anything for us or to interact with us or to guide with us. I mean, they do it out of interest and out of love and affection, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. And one thing I'll be asking him during this year's Lokabrenn is to teach me how to better shine. Whatever it is he's wanting me to do, about how can I shine a little bit more to give honor to him and also to continue to develop and evolve in my own path and practice because we should all be evolving. But that is what I get up to.
Very nice. Very nice. I think
Agreed.
that we're all very, very different, very unique, and somehow underlining it all just very the same.
Yeah, there are definitely common threads. And oh, the only other thing I wanted to mention is that unlike Druid, I do tend to stick to kind of specific days for my celebrations, but there's a couple of reasons for that. The weather in Missouri is bipolar, and that's putting it very kindly. It's not at all uncommon for us to have winter, autumn, spring, and summer all in the same week and occasionally in the same day. So by having specific dates when I honor certain occasions, I'm just saying, okay, this is what should be happening. I am moving into this particular mode of being. And you know what? The weather can just catch up with me when it feels like, especially when it comes to fall. I will put up all of my fall decorations on the 1st of September. I don't care if it's 100 degrees. I'm setting that weather a freaking good example because I was a good sport through summer and now I want my pretty fall colors and I want the things to cool down. But it's also kind of my way of trying to push that wheel of not just allowing the wheel to continue to turn, but actually trying to play a role in the turning itself, in my own small, pitiful human kind of way. But that's the other argument.
Encouragement never hurt.
Exactly. Especially after you've had enough of melting to death the way I do in Missouri. But moving right along, here our next topic is the question, are the gods aliens? If they are, in what sense
Oh,
are they alien? And would that preclude them from being deities? Or does it not matter? So, who wants to tackle this first? Because we could go in a zillion different directions with this.
I'll volunteer to take a shot at it.
Yes.
Tell us your
Uh,
thoughts.
so this was probably the topic that I thought about the most while uh, during the past week, and it for me personally it always drew back to the same question for me of would it matter?
Hmm.
And I each time I was like, well, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're aliens or if they're actually gods. I would treat them the same. They still have this knowledge that I crave. They still want to take me through experiences that excite me and like challenge me and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, for me, it was I don't know. I think I finally found the question that I don't want to go digging for the answer for because for me it didn't matter.
Okay, cool. I can definitely see your point with that. At a certain point, if you know something is bigger and more powerful than you are, its precise nature and origins, perhaps that isn't the most important thing. I can see that. Oh, one thing
I
I thought
love.
about. Oh, go on,
Oh,
Star.
sorry. Sorry. You can go if you want.
Oh no, I was just going to go off into my own little tangent. By all means, take the floor.
Okay. Okay. I love Reaper that you can let go of that question, but I feel like Druid was probably also on my team on this one. I hope. I have to know the answer, sort of. I want to. I can't give up. Um, I've gone down all the rabbit holes that you can think of, processing through these very questions. Um, until recently in my practice, I was holding on to the fact that aliens did not exist because that was one of those last hardcore Christian concepts that I was struggling to let go of. And just wow, such a liberating thought to come over me of just understanding that there's just no possible way that there are not aliens that exist out there. It feels so obvious now. But I think that the gods are different from aliens. But if they aren't, then the gods must be some sort of superior type civilization of gods or of aliens. Like
Hmm.
that's those are the only two things that I have deduced from all of my analyzing.
Oh, I can tell you put a lot of thought into this. I know what your brain is like once you latch onto a concept, you do not let it go. One thing I got to thinking about, the whole question of they were aliens, and I thought, well, okay, in what sense of the term? If we are going to say, well, they are not human, well, okay, I think it's fair that while they have human attributes, certainly they could take on human form if they so desired. I mean, there's nothing saying they aren't doing that right at this very moment. We just don't know. But as you say, they are something more, something that is a bit beyond. So, are they perhaps a more evolved, a previous evolution of humans that attained what we would conceptualize as divinity? I don't know. It is a question I do tend to wrestle with. Could it be that perhaps in a way that the idea of us being children of the gods is somewhat literal, is the whatever makes us human, that makes us distinct from the rest of the animal kingdom, is it that touch of divinity through whatever mechanism, essentially flowing through our veins, and that's what allows us to connect with both the gods and the more spiritual, non-corporeal aspects of things, as well as the animal world and the deeply material. I think about that a lot. What does everyone else think? Where are your thoughts
I
taking
have
you?
I have a very scientific kind of aspect upon this because it touches a couple different corners. So I definitely believe in aliens because the way that our solar system is set up and the fact that we know that there are other solar systems that are similar to ours, the idea that life forms that are similar to us exist just in a different corner of the universe is very real. It's a very real possibility. But I don't believe that they're superior or that they possess any ulterior knowledge than we do, just for the simple fact that, we really haven't made substantial contact enough to say that, yes, indeed, a superior life form exists in the universe. Now, we've heard some rumblings of maybe some communication that we've caught, and I don't know if I would necessarily say that I believe in beings that are so manipulated and different from us. So say they are able to live in other atmospheres or anything like that. But what I do believe in is the actual spiritual composition of our mortal coils. And I know that Briganti and I have talked about this a lot, when we talk about dark matter and what that could possibly be in our universe. And is that potential soul residue that is building up, that is expelled out into the ether? And is that somehow culminated into a manifestation or a spiritual being? And is that us interacting with the universe? Is that the universe being larger and us, becoming a part of that? Those are the things that I think of whenever we think about, are the gods aliens? I don't necessarily think of big heads and black eyes and things like that, but the spiritual composition of it. So I think I'm a little different on that aspect.
I'm glad you brought up that bit about dark matter, because ever since you posted a video about that, my brain has been whirling and whirling around that possibility, because I've always believed that everything, our thoughts, our emotions, our souls, all of it has physical properties, even if it's not visible with our corporeal eyes. And the possibility that's a lot of dark matter that could be in the universe. Is that
Yeah.
souls? Is it what is that stuff? I mean, is this one of the missing links that's going to help us take a huge leap forward in our spirituality and as a species? I don't know, but I'm nerdy enough to be really excited about that possibility.
Me too. Me too.
Oh,
If the
So,
gods are not aliens, which is totally fine,
hmm
if they're not, do they also interact with the aliens? Is
well,
another thought.
what would what would prevent it?
Exactly. I mean, I just
So, in my
lot.
view, when we talk about aliens, what I'm picturing is beings much like us that exist in the physical realm,
hmm
that are born, that have bodies, and that then die.
Mm-hmm.
Um, are the gods like that? Well, in my view, I don't think they are. I think because that they exist on a spiritual realm, that they don't necessarily have physical bodies, and they aren't born and they don't die in the same way that we as living creatures do. Um, that's not to say that the stories about gods who are born and who die and that sort of thing aren't true. It's just to say that I don't think that gods necessarily need to have physical bodies or need to be born and live and die like human beings do. I think that they're beyond
Points.
that.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about aliens, an alien, in my view, is a creature which lives on a planet, much like humans do, that's born, that has a body, and that then dies. And so I don't think that gods and the aliens are the same in that sense. But if you talk about alien as being something different than human, as something different than what we are familiar with, because you can have an alien idea or an alien consciousness
mhm.
hmm
in a fellow living being, in the same way that we have, illegal aliens that come to certain countries. Are those creatures unhuman? No, they're just not from this particular part of the world. And so I think, could the gods be alien in that they're not necessarily the same as us, or that they're from a different realm than the earthly realm? Sure. Um, does it matter? well, I think that really depends on the relationship that you have with them. I mean, if you look at things like Stargate, where they explored this concept, what happens if you find out the gods are physical beings that have bodies that are born and that die and that live in the world as people do? And you tell people, well, your gods aren't real gods because they're, physical beings. And then they stop worshiping them and they're like, well, then they don't deserve to be gods. So in the Stargate universe, clearly it did matter, because if it didn't, all these different planets they visited that worshipped these alien gods, wouldn't have revolted and said, oh no, we're going to overthrow you now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me personally, if it matters, I think the gods are alien in that we can't fully understand them and they live a different existence from our own. And so I don't necessarily think that matters so much, that they're not fully human. But if it turned out that the stories of the gods that we know were inspired by a visit from alien creatures like in Stargate SG-1, I think, well, maybe it would matter a little bit, because, if they came back and they all of a sudden started making demands on you, would they be entitled to do that just because they lived on a different planet or had more technology than you did? And I'm surprised they never discussed this in the show, because I think, it's a very important thing to discuss if you live in a universe like that, where it's provable one way or the other. But I think in our world here and now, where you can't really prove it one way or the other, in my view, the gods are alien because they are not human. But that doesn't mean that they're still not worth interacting with.
Cool take. I like that.
I love how we
Great.
essentially have 5 different takes going here. It shows how many different angles you can really approach the question from, and and what do you mean just by the word alien, and what is divinity? I mean, I think that can take us into some pretty cool and deep territory. We may have to explore this further on another occasion. But let's go
Right.
on to the next topic. And this deals with a common difficulty that a lot of our pagan brethren face, and that's the idea of loneliness. So let's talk a little bit about how we can make friends with pagans who are on different paths, and then let's edge our way into how can we navigate. Ugh, I can talk, I promise. How do we navigate relationships with non-pagans? Now, when it
Join
comes,
the Discord.
yes, join the Discord, please, by all means. But I mean, it is difficult because at some time or another, a lot of us we do want to reach out, and sometimes it's just purely social, where it's not because we're looking for a mentor or we're needing guidance about any particular thing. We just want to talk to someone who has a similar frame of reference, and so you look for pagan groups on social media, and you can't seem to find 2 people alike. And so sometimes I think that has the unfortunate effect of reinforcing people's loneliness rather than negating it. So how can we get past that point? What would any of you say if a newcomer to the faith was asking you about that?
I think for me personally, what I find very helpful is going into it with the acknowledgement that just because a particular path works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for anybody else, and that's perfectly okay. And so
Mm-hmm.
you don't go into it with this need to have to either prove yourself or have other people prove themselves to you. You can just be open to hearing about these different perspectives, and you don't have to agree with any of them, and they don't have to agree with you. But just knowing that just because your path really resonates with you and really works for you, it's okay if it doesn't for somebody else. And I think that takes a lot of the pressure off of yourself, feeling that you need to find people who are just like you. And it also takes the pressure off of anybody you might interact with, because they're not left feeling like you're trying to change their mind about things that they don't want to change their mind about. And I think it leaves the door open for a more relaxing interaction. And I think if you go into it that way from the start, that you're more likely to reach a consensus or a friendship than if you go into it being very, my way or the highway, or, I only want to interact with people who are exactly like me. And I think that closes you off from meeting new people, and even people that you might otherwise totally be able to be best friends with, but you disagree on one little thing. If you let that tear you apart, it's not really worth it, in my opinion.
Oh, I hear you there. And I wonder if perhaps some of the rigidity that we have to deprogram ourselves from does come from prior religious experiences in which there was more an emphasis on conformity, perhaps doctrinal conformity or behavioral conformity, but essentially that you needed to do things a certain way in order to fit in with the group. And then, suddenly you come to paganism and welcome to the wild, wild west, and there is no one size fits all scenario. I think it can take a while to relax into that. Does that make sense, or am I just kind of talking out my hat?
No, you're absolutely right on. And I think Druid kind of hit the nail on the head. It's really hard to be, I guess, strong in your own belief system when you're just coming into things. So you tend to kind of hang back and think, oh, well, I'm new to this, so my opinion doesn't matter. But I think it's really important that people realize that you are, among good people when you're able to speak your opinion. And even if somebody disagrees with it, the people around you are just like, oh, okay, that's cool. This is what I think. And as long as you don't go on to the immediate defensive, and the people aren't attacking you, it's a good way to kind of, like you said, ease in to becoming comfortable enough to stand in maybe some more crazier beliefs that you subscribe to. We were able to have a really good conversation about a bunch of different things, and we all came up with different answers. And it's really neat to find a group of people like that. And I think that pagans should be that way, and it should be more of a bouncing ideas off of each other and being acceptive and supportive to one another.
I want to expand on that a little bit, what you bring up about the value of being able to kind of compare and contrast ideas and being able to entertain them without having the pressure of having to accept them, let alone enact them. Because I know in some of the conversations that I've had with all of you, in which, perhaps I didn't, agree with you exactly, they were some of the most valuable conversations I've had on this server because it forced me to clarify my own thinking. Has anyone else had a similar experience with that?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Yes.
I think being able to have a conversation with somebody who sees the same thing but interprets it differently than you is very valuable, because it helps you to become stronger in your own faith. If nobody ever challenged you on your own belief, you would never have to defend it, and you would never build up those muscles of your belief, because you'd just be sitting on the couch all day having people agree with you and toss you cookies,
Mm-hmm.
and you would never have to get up and walk around the block, and you would never build up those spiritual muscles. And so I think even interacting with people who see things completely the opposite that you do is valuable, and it lends itself to spiritual growth, even if ultimately you decide, no, I really don't agree with that.
Hmm.
And I really don't think I'm going to incorporate it into my worldview.
Oh,
But
I'm 1,000% right there with you on that one.
knowing that about yourself, and knowing that about your faith, and believing your faith after you've done the work, I think is valuable, because faith without work is useless, because it's not really faith. And faith, for me personally, isn't about believing something blindly and without question. It's about not being afraid to ask the questions, and then being willing to believe the answers, regardless of what other people say. And so you have to ask the questions and entertain other answers before you can get to that point. And so I think, I don't know, there's just something about that I think is useful, and that I feel like more people should be open to that. People, they tend to get defensive, and they don't want to hear other viewpoints if it's not something that they agree with, or they don't want to do that spiritual work.
Well, and don't we see that all the time in other segments of society of people, they're clinging to their tribe and what they were told to believe, and when they're confronted with it, they don't want to go through that process of thinking. And maybe some of it is fear of they're worried that they're going to find this massive hole in their reasoning and they're not going to know what to do with it, and their entire social structure could collapse in on itself if they deviate from what they were told to accept. I think perhaps the greatest strength of a pagan circle, in which when people can talk the way all of us here do, is that it can be a place where it is perfectly fine and encouraged to flesh out these ideas, explore them, play with them, kind of go through the steps of thinking them through, and then making a determination. Because then when we are challenged in the real world, whether it's about our religion or anything else we believe that's dear to us, well, we've already built up some confidence. And I think when people are never allow themselves to engage in conversations like this, they are denying them an opportunity to build their own self-confidence.
Yep, and I think it's also important to acknowledge that you don't have to throw yourself into the deep end. All right, you don't have to, the first time you meet a pagan on a different path, immediately get into some big philosophical discussion about this, that, and the other thing. Like, you don't,
Yes.
because if the first time you get up off the couch you decide you're going to run a marathon, you're going to throw out your back, or you're going to fall over, and it's going to be a disaster. And you don't.
That's a perfect
the
analogy.
First time you get up off, you know what I mean?
Love it.
So you've been sitting on the couch, everyone agrees with you, tossing you cookies. You finally decide, I'm going to get up, and I want to walk out the door and see what's out there. And you can just, the first time, just walk out and just look. You don't even have to walk. You can just get up and go to the window and look outside and see what other people are saying, and you don't have to necessarily jump right in right off the bat, because you need to build up your muscles. And just getting up and looking is going to help you with, it's a baby step, but it's an important first step to take. I mean, you don't want to stay in your house, and you don't want to stay just an observer, but it's okay to start there. And I feel like people get afraid because they think they have to do everything all at once, because they've made the decision they're going to make new pagan friends, and they decide that the first thing they're going to do is they're going to jump right in and they're going to start talking to people. And then when they can't handle it, when their legs give out, they're like, oh, that was dumb, I should never do that again. It's like, no, you just went a little too fast, too quick, but you can still do it. And I think even when I joined this server the first week, I didn't talk to anybody. I just kind of sat back and watched and looked at what other people were saying before I actually started really talking to people. And now look at me. Now I'm on a podcast.
Things have progressed considerably. Go on, Sean.
I was going to say, to take it back to the original question, like advice for meeting new people of our beliefs, I feel there's a certain level of like blind trust involved. Not a terrible amount, but I think we can all agree there are, for lack of a better word, fanatics that are, it's my way or the highway. And until you interact with somebody, you can't be 100% sure if they're that way or not.
Yeah.
So I think my advice would be you have to allow yourself to trust that these other people aren't like that. Because, I mean, if I never did that, I would have never been in the Discord.
Yeah.
Because we met on Gab and we chatted like 4 or 5, I think 4 or 5 paragraphs.
Yeah,
and then you invited me.
I was doing my best to drag you over. I was on a mission.
And it was just one of those moments that I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'll jump in the deep end. Not like, I don't think I overstepped. I definitely stayed reserved for a little bit. But once I heard about the Wednesday call, I was sold.
Oh,
So
Yeah.
I I was going to say that I have been part of many, many, many social media witchy groups. I have searched high and low for the right place with the right people, and I found it here, which was so strange because it ended up being just this off the wall comment embedded on a Facebook post. That I was like, I clicked on the link and I ended up here, and it became this Alice in Wonderland sort of a thing, but in like a good way where there wasn't a evil queen, it was the nice queen already.
okay, we're
um,
stroking the Leo ego a little bit here.
um,
Hey, Queen of Wands pulled up in your reading, didn't she?
That was Journey Through the Tarot. She simply came up in order.
There you go.
Oh,
but
Fine.
yes, it is easy to get discouraged when you find pagans that have a my way or the highway, which is just such a common thread throughout monotheistic religions, and that I think that a
Hmm.
lot of pagans are just sick of, and that's why we're here.
Yeah.
And
And also too, I
Mhm.
knew some pagans in the past who, they would let things outside of their paganism influence how they treated fellow pagans. You know what I mean? Like they would let secular concerns sort of completely take over a pagan space, and um, to the point where it was almost a replacement for their religion.
exactly,
And that
like
and
we're
that was
defeating our
very
own purpose here.
and that was
Yes.
and that was very off-putting. Um,
Mhm.
and in some cases downright physically dangerous. And
which is
so,
horrifying to even think of that people are taking things so far. And
right? And
especially
so,
when it comes to,
I'm glad that I moved away from that group and came to a place. I mean, yes, this is all digital, so you don't have to necessarily worry about those aspects in a digital space. Um, but I think, it's important to not give up because the first time you try to make friends, it might not work out.
yeah.
Um, but if you take that lesson from the mosquito and you value persistence, you may eventually find somebody who is willing to be your friend.
Well,
Let's
just
see.
know that we're also taking our lessons from the Wasp, so we don't want any haters around.
No, no, we are here to recover from our bruises and batterings, not to have more inflicted upon us. What about relationships with non-pagans? Because those can be difficult because, well, we're still relatively new into
Right.
the renaissance of paganism. There's probably more misconceptions about who we are, what various traditions believes, than there are facts available, and of course we all know how anything sensational it can prejudice people's minds. And if they never encounter any other information, well, that that can tend to color their perceptions possibly for the rest of their lives. So I think this isn't just geared towards newbies to helping them figure out and how to find their way, but also just to all of us in general. What things have helped any of us dealing with perhaps tricky relationships with non-pagans, people who either didn't approve of our path, didn't understand it, or who are actively seeking to take us away from it? What are things that we've done that have actually helped us that might help someone else?
the big one that I normally do is if I have a friend that, because I obviously don't just walk up to somebody and be like, "Hi, I'm Sean. I'm a pagan. Nice to meet you." But
That's not how
I've
you
had
do
I've had a few people that after like we got comfortable together, the topic of our religious beliefs would come up, and they were less than pleased with where mine lied. And once you've built up like that comfortability with somebody and hopefully a certain level of respect, for me it's been as easy as sitting them down and going, look, I respect what you believe. It doesn't bother me at all. All I ask is that you respect what I believe and understand it's my choice. We don't
That's
have
very
to talk about
reasonable.
it. We don't have to do anything more than just coexist.
I love that. Coexist, that's a pretty low bar. I think that should probably be manageable in most cases. What about anyone else? Because I don't want to hog the floor on this. What what have helped
I
you other
suppose I
ladies?
can. I'm not sure if a lot of people, even after I explain to them that I'm a druid or my particular view on the divine and spirituality, I don't think a lot of people have a tendency to realize at first that I might fall on the pagan spectrum because a lot of people don't know too much about it, really.
Hmm.
And so they think, well, you worship a concept of the divine and the spirit of the divine. And so that makes you a monotheist like us. And so we're not really going to consider you outside of that sphere because what you believe is not necessarily obviously contradictory to what we believe. And so I don't really tend to have a lot of, confrontations because most people just don't understand what I'm doing. And they just
Hmm.
can't, and they just don't recognize it really. And so it kind of flies under the radar. I suppose that's my druid privilege, right? A lot of
Yeah.
people wouldn't consider most, druids who aren't actively out there worshiping like the Morrigan or, you know, the phases of the moon wouldn't recognize that as pagan. And also it doesn't have the same kind of cultural, footprint that something like Wicca does or
Hmm.
Mhm.
the Norse religions do because those are things that have been in movies, they've been in comic books, and that's, and they've been steadily gaining in popularity. And a lot of people look at Druidry and they say, oh, well, I don't know anything about that. That sounds like, a fun club to be in because, there were, of course, for a long time, a lot of non religious clubs that called themselves Druid, societies and things like the, Masons or the Boy Scouts or the whatever. And so they don't really look at that as a religion, which in itself can be a problem when you want somebody to recognize your path as a valid religion and they don't even see it as one.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely pros and cons with that.
so, but for me, mostly I find if I explain, where I'm coming from, and I say, and it's okay if you don't agree with me, you don't have to. Um, I'm just telling you what I think.
Hmm.
And I find for the most part, people are accepting of that, even if they don't agree with me. Um, but again, I've been extremely lucky and I haven't run into too many people who were hardcore about that kind of a thing. I said, aside from that last group that I was with that
Yeah,
let secular matters into the group and they were religious about their politics.
that sounds
Mhm.
And
really
and that
extreme.
was a very bad experience.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, and so I had a trouble with it. Wasn't because I was pagan or a druid that the problem arose. It was because, you
They were
know,
crazy.
well, they became very wrapped up in a certain sect of politics. And when they found out that not me, because I never talked about politics, but one of my relatives fell on the opposite end of the political spectrum, he was physically attacked and had to go to the hospital. He was fine, but the fact that that kind of a thing happened, and then they said, well, you're not allowed to meet with our group anymore. And
That's
and that
insane.
hurt. That hurt because, you know, it wasn't that they disagreed with me. They just assumed that because my relative disagreed with them, that I would have the exact same belief and that
Yeah, no,
therefore I
that's
deserved to be
insane.
kicked out. And so,
Hmm.
coming from, and they didn't even ask if he was all right. I'm like, he went to the hospital and you didn't even think to ask if he was okay. Like, come on, what kind of a
People
jerk
are
move is that?
lost. People are just absolutely
And
morally
so I'm like,
bankrupt these
and that was
days.
in it. And that was in a space that, I had been with this group for about 3 years, and they'd been over to my house. I'd had them over to my house, you know, for rituals and holidays and things. And, when that kind of thing happens, it can be tough.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think, even if you find people that you agree with religiously, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to agree on other things. And, if you're trying to make pagan friends, and you want to have pagan friends so you can have that pagan community and things, I'm like, don't limit yourself or rely on only that. Make sure that the people that you're trying to make friends with are worth being friends with for other reasons than just the fact that they're pagan.
I think that's a good rule
And
of
I
thumb
and I
all
just
around.
I wanna put that out there because yes, this is a question about how can you make pagan friends and how can you navigate relationships with non-pagans. And I think, again, being open and honest
Mm-hmm.
about where you stand and where you come from and being willing to discuss other ideas without compromising your own beliefs is important. But it's also important to realize that not every relationship is going to work out,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay. You don't have to stay in a relationship just because you want a relationship.
That is
And
very
if
sound
you
advice.
and if you do the work and you look for people who are compatible with you will eventually find the place that you belong. And it might not be the first place, and it might not be the second place. It might not even be the third place. But eventually, you'll find some place that you belong.
Absolutely. For myself, when it's come to dealing with non-pagans, I was never in the broom closet. I was always open. I wasn't going around announcing to the people who were around me at the time what I was doing. But if I was reading one of the books about Wicca or paganism, I was reading it in the living room. I wasn't hidden away in the house. Anyone could see what I was up to. And if anyone had asked me, and sometimes they did, what I was reading, I was just very honest and upfront with it. I tried to not make it a big deal so it would never become a big deal. Now, when I'm in public, I always wear my pentacle necklace. It's there for anybody to see who would feel like looking. And when people, kind of, when the topic of religion comes up organically, I'm very straightforward, not aggressive. At least I hope I don't come across as aggressive to them. It's just simply, I try to treat it as normal. I try not to anticipate backlash from them. Because if I'm not bringing that nervousness or that anxiety into the conversation, then I think it's less likely that they will. And also, I found that it helps if someone needs a moment to adjust to the fact that I'm pagan, and I don't usually use the W word right away, not until I'm a little bit more sure of them. I do give them an adjustment period, but uh, if can tell they just need a minute, one of the things I do is I will turn the conversation to very ordinary, everyday kind of matters. You know, it might be, their flower bed, or, how is their dog Fido doing? Or, I saw this movie. I just try to reinforce to them, I am still a normal person who has a normal life, even if I'm praying to different gods from you. So, any other advice you might want to toss out, Georgia, Star, about this before we move on to our last topic?
I was going to say that since I had fully adapted that I was a witch, I was going to practice paganism. I started, I guess, sort of advertising. I have never been a person that wears anything other than my authentic self at all
Hmm.
times. Which I definitely understand is not going to be for everyone. Um, I have, in doing so, I have attracted some unpleasant experiences. I have an ex boyfriend that is not a pagan in any way, shape, or form that decided that he felt that he could perform a magical spell on me, which was extremely unpleasant. Of course, I came right here to the Discord for advice and venting. Um, but I can see now by being so open about, like, because I will point blank say, yeah, I'm a witch. In a sort of a what are you going to do about it attitude. And I feel like that will, in my aspects, it has driven away people that I don't want to foster relationships with, and that acceptance of that I am not for everyone, kind of as Druid was saying. Um, and hopefully purposefully attracting people of like mind, because it's always easier to foster relationships when you have similarities. Even here, as we are so different and so eclectic, we still have common threads that we rely on in fostering our relationships. It's such a beautiful thing to witness. It unfold every week, but I definitely have learned that I should maybe be a little bit more cautious in my being so upfront. That maybe I should be more on guard and protective, and just maybe for me finding more of a balance between how do I. I'm kind of at that point where I just maybe I should address non-pagans a little bit differently than I have, and I might reap a different outcome. So.
I find that there's a balance to be found between sneaking around in the bushes, because if you do that, people are going to think you're up to something hinky, even if you're not. But
Okay.
also, you know, not going out of your way to hide the things that
Advertise.
you're doing, but not going out of your way to like shove it in people's faces either.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to
Mhm.
throw yourself a parade and march down the street with a big old sign
Which I
announcing
may have
yourself.
done a time or two.
I mean, just be you and be yourself and be honest. But again, don't go to a sketchy neighborhood and go out of your way to attract unwanted attention. But don't hide yourself away in your closet either.
Yeah.
Again, balance.
Absolutely. Georgia, I want to give you a chance to get the last word on this topic before we go on. Anything you want to say or?
I kind of agree with Star. I since I started my path, I've always worn my heart on my sleeve, so to speak. And sometimes it, brought some negative drawback, but I, flexed those spiritual muscles. I was able to um, kind of question myself and deepen my belief system through that process. I enjoyed that challenge, whether it be from a non pagan or another pagan or my way or the highway type of person. In my younger years, I was much more into confrontation than I am now. Now I'm more set in my ways, and it's easier for me to just say, yep, you keep doing you, and I'm going to keep doing me. And I think that that comes with experience. And, we've all kind of said, kind of the same vein and idea that, you strike a balance, yes, but no, in a way, because you're always you. You're always authentic. So I've never come across a situation where, I felt like I had to be closeted or closed minded about the type of situation that I was in. And most of the time when you drop the W word, whether it be Wiccan or witch, people get really curious and invested at that point, and they want to question you and ask you about all sorts of crazy things. And I know that we've probably all been in that scenario where it's the rundown. Oh, can you do this and can you do that and what's this and what's that, and you're just like a supposed to be a walking encyclopedia, and that can be exhausting. But you know there goes flexing those spiritual muscles again.
Oh, for real. Those occasions can get exhausting. But I like to think that if someone's approaching us in a good spirit, that eventually that plants seeds and like, oh, okay, those people aren't so bad. But our last
Yeah.
topic of the evening, and this is purely speculative, but do you think that the gods use modern storytelling as a way of speaking to us today?
Modern storytelling. Define modern storytelling.
Books, poems, articles, movies, whatever. Do you ever find yourself thinking, the spirit of that character or the scenario of what's going on, that's vaguely familiar? It just feels like there's a
Well, I
little
think
oomph there.
everything kind of has its recycle and upcycle and season of being. So just the very nature of humanity and what we're interested in is a very divine kind of speculation. We like thinking about the tragic hero. We like
Hmm.
rooting for the underdog. We like the evil villains being defeated. So modern storytelling is just a recreation of old storytelling, is it not?
Well, to a certain degree. One of the things I thought about was specific characters. For example, Princess Leia. I'm using her as an example because I think almost everyone who hasn't been living under a rock is aware of who she is. Does she not serve as a very excellent avatar for any goddess of sovereignty ever? The woman who is the ruler, who is in control, who is on this mission to save her people. We see so many different goddesses who were tied directly to the land and deciding who was going to be conveyed authority over that land. I do feel like she's kind of a modern take on that. But what about everyone else? Can you think of any stories or genres or characters where you're just like, I see the spirit of so and so in that?
Um, I can't think of any like direct examples, but
Hmm.
whenever I'm like, it doesn't happen all the time, but I have had times that I am debating a topic with myself or a subject or struggling with it or whatever it may be, and I'll find myself in like a bookstore and like one book just will call out to me
Hmm.
like, hey, pick this one up and give it a read. And sometimes it's a book of fiction, sometimes um it's a spiritual book. Other times it could just be like a magazine or a news article or something. And uh surprisingly enough, whenever I follow that feeling, it might not always give me the answer, but it like pushes me further in the correct direction to solving what I'm struggling with.
I can see that. A couple months ago, I came across a series of books. It was the retelling of certain myths, and the authors they were trying to fill in some gaps of some things. I remember a particular one about Medusa, and then a second about Hades and Persephone. The one that dealt with the Hades and Persephone story is by far the best. I felt as though the author somehow got inside of the heads of these deities, and explanations of why they did what they did when they did and various things and their interpersonal relationships and different factors that affected their behavior. When I was done reading that book, I was just, whoa. I felt for the first time I was actually able to recognize the spirit of those deities because of the way this author wrote about it. And this wasn't a pagan author. She wasn't trying to teach a lesson or make any kind of spiritual point. She was just trying to get to the heart of the story. And somehow I felt like I knew those deities a little bit better afterwards. And this doesn't happen with every book that might borrow from mythology to write about. It's just every so often there's something a little bit more there. I think maybe that author was touched just a little bit, and the insight that she gained from that touch was just, it bled out onto the page. And at the moment, I felt like maybe they are trying to communicate with us. They've always communicated with us through stories. Maybe just tiny little glimmers, pieces here and there. They're still doing the same in modern times.
I completely agree with all of that pretty much. I I feel like there's this preconceived notion for an outsider who is non-pagan that pagans are serving or worshiping dead gods. And I really can't feel like that's farther than from the truth, like than possible. I swear I can talk. uh, I I feel like the gods work through the universe, and the universe is what we are experiencing in the day to day. Experiencing being touched by the gods can manifest in a lot of different ways. Um, so I do agree also with Sean that there isn't one specific thing that per se comes to mind, but it feels like it's such an obvious thing when you step back and you really look at how we have designated the very word coincidence incorrectly. It is not and cannot be a random happening if it is that coincidental that we would classify it as such. That it's even in the word itself in its current definition is taking the magic out of what's occurring around us. And I just, yes, the gods are definitely very much alive and very much speaking to us in as simple as the breeze that comes out of nowhere while you're on your nature walk praying, and asking for a direction to go. Even that can carry you to a new mental space where you've thought of something new if you allow it. So
You know what you're saying
I,
just
I
now.
feel very much
Oh, go on, Druid.
I, I I feel very much the same way. You know, a lot of people say, "Oh, those are just stories," and I'm like, "Well, what is the deciding factor between what is a story and what is an item that you can take spiritual knowledge from?" Because I don't see any reason why the divine wouldn't continue speaking to us through the medium of story,
Hmm.
and I don't see any reason why you can't take spiritual insight from secular media, from stories, from paintings, from music. All of those things, I think, can contain an element of divine inspiration, whether the person who wrote them believed in a particular divinity or not, or whether or not they were writing them with the particular intent of providing spiritual insight. Um, and so I think that, if you're open to it, you can gain spiritual insight from all sorts of things. And so I think, again, the medium of story is important for human beings because I don't think other creatures tell stories necessarily. And so
Hmm.
I think that that is something that is unique to us, at least on this planet anyway. Um, and so it's important to consider that, I don't think that the divine ever stopped talking to people. I think we just stopped listening.
100%.
Well, doesn't
Yes.
that speak something about the affection the deities must have for us if, even after all that neglect, if they're still reaching out? Um, this was not a prepared question. I'm totally springing this on all of you, but as we've been discussing this, do you feel a little bit more reassured of the God's interest in us? And do you just feel that, the connection we have with them is also perhaps emotional as well as spiritual? Or, just what do you make of that concept in general?
I think that I'm just reinvigorated every time that my mind is stimulated with the conversation because I'm able to justify and align what I believe even more perfectly. So any type of progressive conversation in that direction just kind of makes me feel. I know the word is cliche, but solid.
Hmm.
Just completely. on solid ground and, you know, not wavering.
Yeah, solid
I
ground
think
is
it's
that's rare
very
these
valuable.
days.
I
Hmm.
think it's very valuable to have these discussions because even you might be the most, you know, devoutly religious person on your particular path in the world, but unless you're living in a monastery, you have other things that are influencing your life that you have to think about, and sometimes maybe you lose track of the divine. You might not mean to, but it's going to happen. You're not going to be thinking about it 24/7 all the time.
No.
If you were, you'd never get anything done unless you lived in a monastery.
And
Um,
even then, monasteries still have
so I think
chores. Someone's got to tend the garden and mend the roof and everything else.
right, and so you can go into it with all the meditative mindset in the world, but it's going to be impossible to 100% focus 100% of the time on you know the divine or your deity or your path.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's valuable to have conversations like this with
Hmm.
other people to sort of give yourself a chance to consciously focus on the spiritual, to, without getting lost in it
Yeah.
necessarily. Because if you get too focused on it and too lost it, then you turn into a navel gazer and then you're not able to interact with the world.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is
and
particularly bad for
that's not
pagans.
necessarily
Because think about all of our basic premises. It's all about how to integrate ourselves into the world, how to interact with the world, how to live our lives in that world. So if we get stuck, inside our own heads and we can't see past the end of our own noses, well, I mean, we have lost the principal lesson of all of it.
right. And again, for me, I believe that there is a spirit of divinity that can be present in all things. But those things are still things in and of themselves, too. And so if you see only the divine or only the thing, you're not seeing the whole picture. And you need to be able to look with both eyes instead of just constantly walking around with one or the other closed and swapping out between them.
I'm glad you say that because now we have proof for the audience that Georgia and I are not the only people who say and think that. How many of our conversations over the past couple of months have centered on that very principle, Georgia? Oh my goodness.
Oh, so many.
All righty. Well, I think we have covered our main topics tonight, and thank you everyone for being willing to go along with me on this ride. I know this is new territory for some of you, and I know it was a little bit nerve-wracking, and I'm just so thankful that you came to represent our community and to bring forth your ideas to a wider audience. I'm really touched, and several of you said really, really nice things about the group and this past evening, and it got me a bit misty-eyed, I'll admit it. But uh, before I get lost in
Well, thank you so much
feelings,
for having us.
oh, it's an absolute treat, and I hope this will not be the only occasion we do this. I'd like to give everyone an opportunity to have their last words of the evening. It could be anything you want to say about anything topic we've discussed or any topic you want to bring to attention. Just what would you like to say to the world with a thought to leave them with until the next occasion?
Um, I guess the final thing I would say is just kind of like a subtle reminder to everyone listening that, like, while we have our beliefs and we showed multiple times during this that we all think differently, the most important thing to remember about your own path is that it is your own path. There are probably a lot of things that all of us said tonight that might not be relevant but to you, but it might be relevant to someone else, and keep that in mind as you press forward.
Awesome. Let's see, Georgia, anything you'd like to say before we go?
I wholeheartedly agree with Sean's sentiment. I think that you should also join the Discord because it's a lot of fun and you can get in on conversations like this every Wednesday night. And I think that, it's a great place to start if you are looking to expand your horizons.
Aw, awesome. Star, would you like to say anything to everyone?
It's a lot of a repeat, but the Discord is definitely where it is at. There's so much information that Brigantia has prearranged, as well as other members just adding to it on the daily, just interactions on so many different types of topics, varying from current events to ideas on celebrating different pagan holidays. It's so, I feel like I'm losing it, and I'm not being able to express to you how amazing and wonderful this truly unique space is. And you just have to come here and experience it in order to believe it. So I hope that you do.
Awesome. Thank you, Star. And Druid, any last thoughts you'd like to share?
I just like to share, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you to everyone who listened. And, I'm happy to share my path and my beliefs. But they are one way among many, and what works for me might not work for you, and that's totally okay. And, if you'd like to interact with any of us more, again, join the Discord if you like. And, we'll be around.
Awesome. Well, everyone, you hear it. The Discord is where it is at. You do not have to be lonely. You do not have to be adrift in the world. I know there's a lot going on right now, and the world just feels crazy. There is a place where you can diffuse and decompress and take a little bit of that crazy out of your system, or at the very least, be able to encounter people who are being driven mad by the same things that you are, but who are willing to have productive discussions about what we can all bring to the table to try to confront some of the challenges our society is facing, as well as the occasional helpful hint about where you can take your own personal path next, and how you can make your path truly yours. But that will do it. Thank you again, everyone, and to the audience, thank you for sticking with us through this whole thing. It's a very long-form discussion. I hope you found it worth your while. Please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Please leave us a comment so we know what you think of it. And of course, please follow Nocturnal Pagan on his channel on YouTube. Please follow Georgia Liberty on Wiccan Conservative on YouTube or Rumble. And of course, check out the blog of Druid Fox. So that does it. Bye!
Bye.